Okay, calm down.
Hello, and how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and it's nice to be with you, Katie.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much, Gabor Maté. So excited to talk to you. So honored to talk to you. You're such a valuable voice on so many subjects. And on this one, you have a really unique, important perspective. Can you talk about your own experience as a Holocaust survivor?
I did survive the Holocaust. I was born in January 1944 in Budapest, and I was 2 months old when the Wehrmacht, the German army, occupied Hungary. Hungary, having been an ally of Germany, was going to drop out of the alliance, seeing which way the wind was blowing, and the Germans then um, militarily occupied the country. And Hungarian Jews, until that point, had been spared the genocide. They were discriminated against. My father was in forced labor with the Hungarian army, but there was not the genocidal deportations, which then were about to begin once the Germans came in. So I spent my first year under German occupation, and it was really sort of one of those vagaries of history that my mother and I weren't ourselves deported, just the way it happened. I'm not going to go into the exact historical details, but the point is we survived under Nazism and then under a very fascist anti-Semitic regime, which again started killing Jews in the fall of 1944, when 500,000 Hungarian Jews had been already deported and killed in Auschwitz, including my grandparents.
Can you talk about what your mother did to protect you?
Well, you can imagine. Here's a story. She after her parents were deported, her breast milk dried up. But Jews couldn't leave their homes until a certain time of the day. And because there was no refrigeration in Hungary in the wintertime, in the summertime, by the time she got to the stores, the milk was already being spoiled. And then we had to move into the ghetto, where the conditions were awful. At some point, for a few days, we lived in a nominally Swiss protected home, where there were 1,000 people living in a building where there might have been comfortable room for 50 or 60. And she finally ended up giving me to a stranger in the street, a Christian woman, begging her to take me to some relatives who were in relative safety in hiding. And so I didn't see her for 5 or 6 weeks until the Russians finally liberated the city from the Germans. So that was my first year of life. And I was sick with dysentery. I was ill. It came close. It was a close call.
How old was your mother when she had you?
Okay, let's do some figure. Born in 1919, she was 25. She was not yet 25.
And at that point, when she got pregnant, there was no occupation.
At the time she was pregnant, Hungary was already in the war. The Jewish men were in forced labor. Many of them were taken to Russia with the Hungarian army, where the Hungarian army got wiped out, but disproportionately Jewish men were killed under horrible conditions. So my father was in forced labor all throughout her pregnancy. It was an anti-Semitic, pro-Nazi allied regime that we lived under, and that's how she was pregnant. I've done a lot of research recently on the impact of maternal stress during pregnancy in infants. My mother had jaundice of pregnancy, which is totally stress-related disease. So already in the uterus, I would have got the messages of stress and trauma.
So she sees a woman on the street. How does she decide who to?
She doesn't decide. She decides that I can't survive another day in that house. And she doesn't know whether she'll survive or not, because the Hungarian fascists were coming to the house and taking Jews down to the Danube and shooting them into the river. So she doesn't know. She sees the Christian woman and says, "Would you please take this baby?"
Wow.
That's what happened.
Did you ever track the Christian woman down?
No, no, but there was a story I read recently in a family history written by a cousin of mine, an elder cousin, with whom this Christian woman took me to their place, and I was so sick. And my cousin's father took his life into his hands to find a Christian doctor to come and see this baby.
Wow.
And this Christian woman comes and examines me. They thought I might have tuberculosis. And she examines me. She finds I don't have TB, but I did have severe bronchitis. She gives me medicine. And my cousin said that when that Christian woman arrived at my house, at their house with me, she had never seen just terror and fear in a human being as she saw in my eyes. Now, this Christian doctor says to me after she examines me, she says, "My little son, don't worry, you will repay their kindness later on." And
Wow.
so I'm telling you, from my perspective, talking about the Palestinian issue is one way of repaying the kindness.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, because the lesson of the genocide, the never again, is not a tribal slogan the way I understand it. It has to be about how human beings treat other human beings. Now, some of my Jewish co-religionists or
Co-ethnics, cultural, yeah,
whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
it's like, you're never going to do this to us again. But that's not what it means to me. To me, it means that human beings will not act that way again anymore.
right,
And it's not a question of drawing analogies. Nothing can compare it to the genocide and its horror and its deliberate, mechanized, murderous insanity. But Edith Egger, who's a psychotherapist who went to Auschwitz on the same train as my grandparents as a teenager, and she survived, and she's become a famous psychotherapist and author, and she's 92 now or 93, and she's still writing books.
wow.
She says in one of her books that there's a Hitler in all of us. You
Mm,
don't have to be German to have a Hitler inside you, and being Jewish doesn't spare you from having a Hitler inside you. And by Hitler, I don't mean all the things that he did. I'm talking about prejudice. I'm talking about insanity. I'm talking about hatred. I'm talking about racial hostility. I'm talking about cruelty. And that capacity, just as the capacity for love and connection and compassion, is in every human being. It's a question of which part of us do we identify with. In other words, how afraid we are, because it all has to do with fear.